State leaders align with Turning Point. Braun declines to sign syringe-exchange legislation, and funding on track for the Imagination Library. From the television studios at WFYI Public Media, it's Indiana Week in Review for the week ending March 13th, 2026.
Indiana Week in Review is produced by WFYI in association with Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations. Additional support is provided by Par Ritchie.
Governor Mike Braun is calling for conservative Christian-aligned organizations to expand in Indiana schools. As Ben Thorpe reports, critics say the move blurs the line between religion and education.
Governor Mike Braun is calling for conservative Christian-aligned organizations to expand in Indiana schools. Critics say the move blurs the line between religion and education. Indiana is partnering with Turning Point USA, the conservative group formerly led by Charlie Kirk, the campus activist killed in a shooting last year. Braun says the partnership is about ensuring conservative students can be as loud as their peers.
It's not endorsing anything particularly. It's making sure you've got the freedom of speech to be as loud about your point of view as the other side has always exercised with high decibel levels.
It's not clear how the partnership will practically play out. Braun says schools will not be required to host clubs, and they will still need to be approved through the normal process. In a statement, Democrat Shelley Yoder said, quote, "Hoosiers deserve schools that educate, not indoctrinate."
Will this partnership thrive in Indiana? It's the first question for our Indiana Week in Review panel. Democrat Robin Winston. Republican Mike O'Brien. John Schwantes, host of Indiana Lawmakers, and Ebony Chappel, Director of Brand and Community Strategy at Free Press Indiana. I'm Jill Sheridan, Managing Editor at WFYI. So, Robin, does this make sense for the governor to put his weight of the state behind this program?
No, it doesn't make any sense. I do hope that he will allow the ACLU to have chapters, that Southern Poverty Law Center, maybe, Democratic Socialist. But keep this in mind, Jill and everybody, there are already clubs at the schools. There's no need. I talked to 4 or 5 superintendents this week. They already have clubs at the schools. So to put your finger down and say, we want this particular one, particularly overly partisan, I think if you remember, look what the students did a few weeks ago when they walked out in protest of ICE. They're already demonstrating their intensity about being involved in the civics and political process without having to form a club.
So, Mike, is this something that we heard the governor say, he just wants to give all students the right to be loud, to be heard?
This is a group that aligns with what he believes, and I fully expect him to do that. I mean, I wouldn't expect him to balance it out and go, and I'm also for the ACLU to have a club, which they can. And he said that. He said anybody can do this. We sat here 2 weeks ago on the ICE walkouts, and we all thought it was so great. These students were engaging in their communities, practicing good citizenship, staking out a position on a really complicated, controversial issue of the day, and me included. We all thought that was great. And 2 weeks later, now we're marginalizing the governor, saying, no, that's good, and here's a group that can do it. We've had these groups in schools forever, so if we're not going to do this, then keep the Boy Scouts out. There's a religious element to the Boy Scouts. Keep the young Democrats out. Keep the young Republicans out from registering voters and doing the things that this group's saying they want to do. They want to register kids to vote, educate them about their community, and engage them in citizenship.
There's a fundamental difference.
Here's
what it is. We all applauded the fact that the students were engaged and were walking out of their classrooms to show their frustration. You know why they did that? Because they were motivated within or among their peers to do it. The governor did not call for them to walk out.
The superintendents were helping them organize it.
There's a difference. Do you want the chief executive of the state to do this? Is jumping on the bandwagon. We had Sarah Huckabee, the governor of Arkansas, beat the governor here by a day, and had Erica Kirk,
yes.
thank you, there alongside.
With a bunch of
now
kids,
we're going to
too.
have Texas, we're going to have Florida, we're going to have Montana, we're going to have Nebraska. I mean, this is just the latest trend. And the problem is, well, the defense is, for advocates, no tax dollars have gone into this. And that would be a clear violation of the state constitution. Sure. Well, the endorsement, though, the endorsement is still an encouragement. Sure. And call it not an endorsement or not. But what if he said, I think the Catholic faith, he's Catholic, right? The Catholic, everybody from Jasper is. The Catholic faith is the right faith, and I want you to go and pray in school.
Oh, did he say that?
No, he didn't say that.
Oh, of course he did.
Oh, but
that would have been a clear violation.
What if he had said the Republican?
I agree. Get in on this.
Please.
I would love to get in on this. I think the issue there is the full-throated support of one group. If we could see the governor and the Secretary of State come out and offer this full-throated support to every other group, press conferences and the like, I think we would be having a different conversation, but we haven't seen that. I would also like to point out that we have to pay attention to how we are aligning ideologically. I think you bring up a good point, John, about what comes from within the schools and what is being proposed to them from the adults. I have not seen a big surge of students from here in Indiana, which we have to be specific about. There have been some that have come from out of state to help push this organization, but we have not seen that same groundswell from within the state. So I think that is very important to point out.
Then it'll fail.
It's the same thing we're seeing with legislation. A lot of it used to be 20 years ago, and a lot of it still is homegrown. It's organic. A constituent will see a lawmaker who represents him or her in the coffee shop and says, you know, there ought to be a law about this. And they'll attempt it.
And now we have
but
ALEC.
now it's ALEC, and not just ALEC. There are groups on both sides of the aisle and all ends of the political spectrum that are putting boilerplate language forth, cut and paste. And you have authors sometimes saying, you know, I'm not sure what's in the bill. I better go check on that again. And I think they
all come together and develop that, though. They're not just being feted. The groups,
but you know what? I wish we had the
and
same,
it doesn't always.
I wish we had the same full-throated support for our schools and funding and our teachers and funding as we claim for organizations. We're set on a $5 billion budget, supposedly a surplus. Why can't we give more money to our schools? Schools after
we're going
school.
I promise you, we will give a record amount next year in the
to charter schools and vouchers
and public schools.
And
Mike, every single
but also
year.
School district, as you are keenly aware. School district after school district are having to go to the voters and ask for more money because they don't have enough coming from the state. Make the same full-throated commitment to public education.
If it's about freedom and open markets and economic prosperity, I'm sure Junior Achievement would love to have a similar endorsement. I'm sure Junior States of America would love to have a similar endorsement. I'm sure Boys State and Girls State,
the people that fully support
that are already there and have been there.
They should hold a press conference and they should be surrounded by other supporters of that, and they should do it too.
Well, aligning as well.
The ones that he supports. He's a politician, guys. He's not going to He's not going to balance this out.
That part is true because this is what that part of the party nationally wants.
Just like state parties do, and outside organizations do, and the RGA does, and the DGA does, and all these other groups.
We're 200 days away from an election. Amazingly, Turning Point's been around longer than that. They never called for that before. It's in an election year.
You can agree to a little higher profile.
Well, also along with that was our Secretary of State this week aligning voter registration for high schools as part of this effort as well. And you make a good point. You know, we are just a few weeks away from primary elections.
Which is why it's so important. Why the timing was so important.
Let's stress public education funding as intensely as we talk about that.
Well,
there's no time for education. We got too many.
Maybe you'd like to weigh in as well. It's time for viewer feedback. Every week we pose an unscientific online poll question. And this week's question, should the state be partnering with Turning Point USA? Vote yes or no. The last question posed to viewers, will Greg Ballard's entry into the Secretary of State race have a big impact in November? 73% answering yes and 27% saying no. If you would like to take part in the poll, go to WFYI.org/IWIR and look for the poll. Indiana Governor Mike Braun declined to sign a bill to extend syringe service programs. April Rickert reports it's become law now without his signature.
Mike Braun had until Monday to sign a bill extending syringe services programs in the state another 5 years. He says he thinks the programs treat a symptom and don't get at the cause of why they were started in the first place.
I'm not going to sign it, but I'm not going to veto it.
The bill includes requirements for participants to live in certain areas and show ID. Programs will have to adhere to a one-to-one needle exchange and be at least 1,000 feet from buildings like schools and places of worship unless they have permission. 6 Indiana counties have the programs, including Clark and Marion.
So, Mike, is it a surprise that Governor Braun did not sign this bill?
I'm more surprised he didn't veto it, frankly. I mean, I think given anything else, he probably isn't supportive of this, as a lot of Republicans have a hard time swallowing it every time it comes up. And so they did. I think the reason he allowed it to become law, though, was because it was narrowed, because there was a recognition that it needed to be narrowed. The program itself, I think lawmakers in this debate were pretty shocked at like the volume of the program. I mean, 12 million syringes in 6 counties is like, they're like, wait a minute, what? And what outcomes are we getting? Is this successful?
One major outcome is the fact that in places like Scott County, who 10 years ago had a horrific HIV outbreak due to intravenous drug use. I talked about this on the show in January. Yeah. You go back to the latest data from the Indiana Department of Health, less than 5 new cases of HIV. So there are so many fabulous outcomes that have come as a result of that. I think the issue, and I think a part of the issue is that, one, I think it was extremely cowardly of the governor to not take a stand one way or the other on this. So it's very much riding the fence, which I think is unfortunate. And it is yet another example of that party treating substance abuse as a morality issue as opposed to a public health issue, which it is.
Well, Robin, we heard a lot of Republicans at the State House, though, that remember those days, 10 years ago, when we were establishing syringe exchange programs that were in support because they did see the harm reduction impacts that it had for people and were able to get people into services to help with addiction.
I talked to Terry Gooden, who's from Austin, at the epicenter of everything you talked about. And he thinks the program's good. It clearly has worked in his county, a rural county, by the way. It's worked in. There's one part of this bill, though, that you have to turn your syringe in to get another syringe. If you go to any doctor's office, you see that they have a box there that says, put the needles in there. Carrying around dirty needles, I don't think is a good public health initiative. That ought to be scrapped from the bill. I don't think people should have to walk in. The ID part is going to... What's that?
They always had to do that.
They did.
Okay, well, I know they had to do it.
They always didn't.
I understand.
Because there was a deficit.
They always did not, but they now have to. But I just think that's a bad part of the bill.
But the ID that he brings up as well, that Robin brings up, that ID requirement has been kind of a sticking point for a lot of people.
And it probably will discourage some individuals who don't want the stigma associated with it. I guess the other side would say it's a small compromise to be able to continue a program that has shown a value. One thing that wasn't brought up this time, as it was when this first was initiated, was the reflection through prayer. As you'll recall, Mike Pence got a lot of national attention by suggesting he would pray on it and come up with a policy decision. Ultimately, New York Times, others sort of suggested that that's an interesting approach in the state of Indiana to public policy. So I didn't hear that time around, this time around.
That's true.
But once we get religion in schools, then we'll get that squared away.
Extending it for the 5 years, though, it is interesting that he chose not to veto it, but to let it continue. Why do you think that, Ebony?
I think it could be a couple of different things. Maybe it is to buy some goodwill with people who really want to see this happen. And he knows, okay, well, I don't want to disappoint this side that really doesn't want that to happen. So let me try to ride the fence a little bit with it. I feel like it has something to do with that. Maybe it's also a way to not bring on more ire from the White House. I mean, that's a part of it, too, since we know that that is a big part of his motivation behind doing things. Him meaning our governor.
The governor's veto in Indiana doesn't mean much if a bill like this passes overwhelmingly, because they're just going to come back and spike it. Right?
Do you think it will have an impact, though, for people that have used this program successfully?
Oh, absolutely. It's already had an impact. But we have to remember that we have to address this from a holistic approach. It isn't just simply turn in your needles, turn in your syringe, get a new syringe. It's what are we going to do in supports in those communities for people that have a substance abuse problem and an addiction problem that has to be addressed.
And a lot of people argue those programs do help.
They do make a major difference.
And this reveals that sort of simmering below the surface long-term suspicion of, if not antipathy toward public health. There are a lot of people, I say, they need to rebrand because the notion of public health, I think they're the people who give out syringes and condoms to kids in kindergarten and all this kind of stuff. And the notion that it's somehow, Moscow's running.
Let's overcome that, though. I mean,
well,
we've pulled back.
We've pulled back, yeah. But by public, trying. I think for some reason that you'd think that we should have a healthy public, but I guess some people find that problematic.
Jill, they are at least addressing it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you put this in a quiz on a Jeopardy, I don't think they would say Indiana was the state that was doing a syringe-exchange program. So at least the General Assembly addressed it. And that, to me, you asked earlier, doesn't make an impact. The very fact they addressed it makes an impact.
Well, it's still uncertain how much money is remaining to sustain Indiana's Dolly Parton Imagination Library program. Caroline Beck reports Indiana's First Lady, Maureen Braun, says fundraising is on track.
The National Literacy Program sends children a free book every month from birth to age 5 to any family that signs up. The program's future in Indiana was called into question last year when Governor Mike Braun cut $6 million in funding from the state budget. His wife has taken up the task of keeping the program alive. First Lady Maureen Braun said during her annual breakfast fundraiser that they were about 90% of the way to their 2-year fundraising goal.
The benefits of what we're doing aren't just for today, but they'll have an impact throughout these kids' lives.
The program currently sends books to over 143,000 Hoosier children.
So, John, why do you think this program has been such a priority?
By all accounts, we have a literacy problem in our schools and with young people. That has been a priority for a number of years. We've addressed it through teacher training and teacher accountability, and that's been a brouhaha all on its own. But that's been a thrust. The prior governor, Eric Holcomb, actually credited this program with playing a huge role in taking Indiana in terms of national literacy youth rankings from 19th to 6th. And this is a program that sort of rings the bell of public-private partnership, or has at least traditionally in the past, and was originally structured. You know, everybody on both sides of the aisle likes public-private partnerships. It's statewide. Everybody benefits. Kids don't have to buy in, or there's no pay to play. It has proven results. And on top of all that, who doesn't like the queen of country, Dolly Parton? Yeah, I mean, I saved that for last. Yeah.
No, for real. Who doesn't love Dolly Parton? Like, everybody loves Dolly Parton.
That is absolutely true.
Listen, she brought us the vaccine. People feel how they want to feel about that, but she helped do it, you know, and give us great music. But yeah, I think that this is fabulous PR for the governor's office. So shout out to the First Lady for doing what needs to be done to help push that.
Well, a lot of things were cut, you know, when we had a $2 billion shortfall. And one of the things was this Imagination Library. But it was one of the first things to get, you know, revived. And
don't forget, we never really had it. The shortfall. That was a projection.
Well,
quickly, we ended up with a surplus. So all of the entities that got cut, unnecessary, which probably adds to the popularity of funding it now.
A lot of attention to bring back, you know, the Imagination Library. Why do you think that is?
Well, for all the reasons John and Ebony articulated. There's a great event Tuesday morning. They raised a lot of money.
Yes.
You know, so there's a lot of private dollars that are flowing into this too, and then it'll be on the priority list for the next budget.
And yet we didn't hear from the governor. We reached out to understand exactly what, you know, fundraising will look like, what levels of funding we were at. Now, it was $6 million originally in the budget set aside for this, but we're not knowing exactly how much.
Yeah, but this is tremendous. I mean, the First Lady's taken an active role. How do you lose on Dolly Parton, kids, books? I mean, if you're against that, you're against Little League Baseball. I mean, I don't know how you could be against something like that. That's wonderful for her to do it. And it's similar to what Judy O'Bannon did when she was First Lady. She made a priority of Indiana landmarks. They made a big difference. I'm sure that Karen Pence made a priority of Indiana arts. So Janet Holcomb did similar things. So it's just using the bully pulpit of the governor's office to make a difference.
I remember talking with Mrs. Pence about art therapy as well. But I think you make a great point that Dolly is just so universally loved, and no one would want to make her mad.
No, I would want to do whatever she wanted me to do. Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, roughly a half dozen TSA agents in Indianapolis have left the job as the latest federal shutdown has left them without pay. As Ben Thorpe reports, Indianapolis airport officials said there have been no impacts so far at Indianapolis International, but travelers may experience delays at other airports around the country.
TSA agents are still required to work even as they stop receiving paychecks. Kevin Smith leads the local TSA union in Indianapolis. He says agents are still recovering from the last federal shutdown.
We got a couple of paychecks, and boom, we're right back down into, another shutdown, no pay.
Smith says some agents have left the job because of the financial instability. He says he's hopeful the shutdown ends before Congress is set to take a recess at the end of the month.
So, Ebony, is this a difficult cycle that we're getting caught in here?
You know, it is. Even the gambling websites predict that we're going to be in this shutdown until about April, which is wild to even say. But yeah, we shall see. If they're not able to come to an agreement on this funding by Monday, you're going to see people go more and more weeks without pay. And it's egregious. I was reading this morning about people who are sleeping in their cars at the airport to avoid burning gas, selling plasma to make ends meet, to take care of their children. And it is egregious. I would love to see, I don't know if this is possible, to see the airlines step up, or perhaps other corporate interests to help cover this shortfall where our government is failing, to meet the moment. In Denver, they're offering an opportunity to give gift cards to TSA. So I don't know if that's something that we're going to have to see persist or get bigger, but we are really, really in a challenging situation right now.
And we discussed, John, this shutdown not too long ago here on this program. And again, it was the TSA agents that were getting impacted. It seems like they feel the brunt.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's not as if they're sitting on huge cash reserves, saying, don't worry, pay me at the end of the quarter or next. Right. As long as I get it by Independence Day. These are real world problems as Washington bickers about what to do. There was a vote, I believe, in the Senate just last night. Yeah. Didn't go anywhere. And there are various ways probably to do an end run on the core issue. Ironically, the funding is not affecting ICE, which is what prompted this debate and then the whole thing. But there has been talk about breaking off other funding elements so that maybe TSA and others could be funded without Democrats and those who are concerned about ICE's conduct in recent months without appearing to give in.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mike, this most recent shutdown has seemed to gone a little bit more under the radar than the previous shutdown.
Well, we launched the whole war.
It's kind of running the headlines right now.
And maybe even the issue of the ICE agents in Minnesota. It does feel chaotic sometimes when we're discussing these issues. And we're discussing how, the American public is.
This part's just broken. And it's broken when Democrats are in charge, it's broken when Republicans are in charge. The way we budget at the federal level and the leverage that both parties use on each other for issues that are completely unrelated or tangential to a core priority. Mm-hmm. I need TSA to work. Right. Yes. I do them all too. These aren't people making a lot of money. To your point,
this is a new development. I worked for 200 and
making that kind of money. You can't
30
cash
years.
flow for months your lifestyle and your home.
And we shouldn't be asking them in the cash flow for months. I agree with you, Mike. But remember, we tried to peel off TSA funding, and the other guys wouldn't approve it. So it's not like us holding the funding in check.
Well, because it's a big political lever.
But what we're holding in check are guys showing up at your house with a mask, showing up without a warrant, deciding to do whatever they want to do in the streets of Minneapolis and other places until and totally violating constitutional rights of people. Until that's resolved, I don't think you're going to move anything on the ICE issue, which, by the way, is funded to the end of the year. So they're already taken care of. We've tried to peel off TSA. The other guys won't do it. Got to be a compromise.
We train ICE to scan for weapons and explosives at airports.
Bring them to the
want to
airport.
make it so that so many people don't fly.
They're only checking IDs anyway.
Well,
they're good at checking IDs.
They have to take their mask off, though.
Or are we at risk as well of, having no one want to be a TSA agent?
Exactly. I'm surprised here in Indianapolis we haven't had more people quit.
Yeah.
Half a dozen. I'm like, well, that's pretty good. So I don't know how well they're treating them over there. That makes them want to stay. But yeah, it's really challenging. We have to reach some sort of, understanding here, because how is the country supposed to run? You talk about in Houston at their airport, you have the lines backed out to the parking garage, the same as in New Orleans, other big places where they have traffic coming in and out. We have an international airport here. I can't imagine what it would be like to just have the whole entire thing shut down.
I'm getting pretty stressed about my flight.
Remember the movie, Get Out? Let's all go watch Get Out, because TSA was the hero in that movie.
TSA was the hero. Hopefully somebody, stands up to be the hero this time.
All right, well, also coming up this weekend, who are we hoping the bracket as March Madness kicks off? John, what do you think? Can your team have any chance?
September 5th against North Texas.
You're waiting.
Yeah, because, I come from a football school.
Right.
And,
not a basketball school.
No, Purdue, all right. I'm putting aside the animosity that many Hoosiers feel. Let's go with our homegrown team. We'll go with Purdue, since that's the only option I got.
Who do you like, Mike?
I like Purdue getting in. I don't like Purdue being able to win twice in a row.
I didn't say that. You want to know who I want?
Who are you looking for?
Louisville first,
right.
and then Purdue, but then Louisville women's basketball.
Go,
I'm
girls.
looking for.
Is that the same as
How
the
about you,
loser symbol?
Ebony?
Well,
lots of money.
My alma mater has no chance of being in the fight. Chirp, chirp, Ball State.
Right.
So I'm going to pick whoever Willie B. Bird Jr. likes.
And that's Indiana Week in Review for this week. Our panel has been Democrat Robin Winston, Republican Mike O'Brien, John Schwantes, host of Indiana Lawmakers, and Ebony Chappel, Director of Brand and Community Strategy at Free Press Indiana. You can find Indiana Week in Review's podcast and episodes at WFYI.org/IWIR or on the PBS app. I'm Jill Sheridan, Managing Editor at WFYI. Join us next time, because a lot can happen in an Indiana week. The views expressed are solely those of the panelists.
Indiana Week in Review is produced by WFYI in association with Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations. Additional support is provided by Parton.